on the ground. I'm not coming down. I want to go higher, higher, higher than that.
Welcome back to the Business is Human podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Fleetwood Hession, and we're here to bring you episodes that blend meaningful work with profitable success. Here to steward what I call the age of humanity. I believe if we transform the way we work, we can transform the way that we live. As always, my friendly request, if you like what you hear, hit subscribe so you don't miss any episode, and leave a review to tell the other humans that they might like it too. Always looking to help you and connect with others. All right, let's get into it, shall we? Tommy Short, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rebecca. Happy to be here.
I love these situations, and I have several of them, where I go to another state or another country to meet my neighbor here in my hometown. I mean, the number of times this has happened to me is uncanny. So I don't know what that means. God will maybe show that to me some other time, but It's interesting. So we met at a conference and realized we were neighbors and have similar work that we do as speakers and coaches. And I will say to you with complete honesty that I get a lot of newsletters and I don't read a lot of newsletters, but I read your newsletter. So
all right, plus one for the day. There we go.
And yay me.
Yeah, there you go. I appreciate
And it was
that.
a newsletter that you put out fairly recently with some stats about presence,
Yes.
our human to human presence that really got my attention. And I said, please, well, first I said we had to have coffee because now, we're neighbors, but I said, come on the show and talk about it. So would you summarize for me a little bit, for the audience, a little bit about that newsletter and just some of the stream of consciousness stats about presence?
Yeah. So the latest studies that I've seen is the average American will check their phone 205 times a day, which when you think about the average person is getting just under 7 hours of sleep, that means they're checking their phone once every 5 minutes while they're awake, which is pretty staggering. 89% of people will reach for their phone within the first 10 minutes of waking up. 75% of people will respond to some sort of notification within the first 5 minutes, whether that's text, email, Slack, social media, some sort of app on their phone. So 75% within the first 5 minutes. 57% of people have never gone more than 24 hours without touching their phone. And the last one was 47% of people could be clinically diagnosed with anxiety and or depression when their phone battery gets below 20%. And so, cumulatively, those are all shocking, but I think probably the most shocking is the 205 times a day. Can you imagine if a stranger came up to you and just was tapping you on the shoulder 205 times a day? Like, you wouldn't even make it to, 20, you'd, after probably the 7th time, you're filing a restraining order or calling the police. So I think the bigger thing too is like, without the awareness, no behavior change can take place. So just being aware of what your actions are, and then kind of asking yourself, like, am I okay with that? And if not, what is something that I want to do to change that?
Well, just last night, my son was home from Nashville for a few days. And just last night, he said to me, hey, I may drive to a town that's 30 miles away yet tonight. It was late because there's something wrong with the connector piece on his phone. And he has a friend that was going to fix it, which was going to end up monopolizing at least 3 hours of his final night home and his rest and all the things to fix the phone.
Yeah.
And so we're standing in his room talking about it, and he's trying to find a charger cord that's going to work. And we're just having this conversation. And I looked at him, and honestly, I had forgotten that we were doing this today. So it wasn't because I was preparing for this show today, but I looked at him and I said, he's 27. And I said, do you know how much of you and your sister's childhood and the emotional bandwidth as a parent has been taken up by discussing chargers and connectivity to various things that were so-called important to your life, whether it was preparing to go on a trip or My Xbox One won't connect. Can you come help me? And there's a meltdown. And it was just this awareness moment where he's 27 years old and we're still talking about phones and charger cords when we should be just having regular conversations. And now that I saw, oh my gosh, that's what Tommy and I were going to talk about today.
Yeah.
It's wild. And so those are the stats, but what's the cost?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll know for many years to come. I talk about in the book and, when I'm on stage that I'm not against cell phone use whatsoever. It's a tool, but often are we using the tool or is the tool using us? I also say, again, not against cell phones, but what I am against is this burdening regret that may or may not surface for 15 or 20 years, right? It may not surface until your son is 27 and just happens to be home for one night and you realize now he's going to be gone for 4 hours. It's funny you brought that up about chargers because I don't think we talked about this before, but I'll ask during my keynote on presence, I'll ask everyone to stand and I'll ask, okay, keep standing if you have a charger in the following places. And I'll start out, do you have a charger in your car? Most people are still saying, do you have a charger next to your nightstand? Right? Most people are still standing. Do you have a charger, whether you work from home or you go to an office, like in your workspace, right? And what you realize is most people are still standing and they have a charger in all three places. And I'm like, how often do you check in with yourself? How often are you checking in with your own energy? How often are you checking in with your well-being and not just trying to navigate everyone else's priorities? And I think that's kind of, again, another awareness piece of like, oh my gosh, I do have a charger in the kitchen, in any room I can go into, but yet.
And portable ones that I can put in my bag.
There you go, right? God forbid we should go without our phone. But again, I think just the awareness piece and just continuing to ask people, not tell people, but just ask people, like, is that what you want to be doing? Or, is there a better way? I don't necessarily offer prescriptions, but just the option for someone to ask them, have someone ask themselves that question to see, like, is this what I want to be doing?
And I immediately think of my work. I connect things biblically into our nervous system. And my first assignment to a client as a coach is a daily stillness practice.
Yeah.
And the first assignment is 10 minutes minimum of daily stillness to start your day. And I actually have had people say, I might need my money back. I don't know if I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because,
isn't that crazy?
Because being still with our own thoughts and our own self-reflection has become, for some people, troublesome.
That was the scariest part. I'm sure we'll get into it about going a year without the cell phone was the silence. When you realize that it's just, you and your thoughts, the silence can actually be the loudest part of your day, at least initially, because too often we're too busy, right? Too often we have to check things off the to-do list. And I'm not saying, abandon all your responsibilities, but that alone time, that stillness, whether it's with God, whether it's just with yourself, whether it's, journal, whatever, meditating, whatever that practice looks like for you. But that can be the scariest time because as a society, we've become bored being bored. We just don't know how to sit with ourselves.
Yeah. Well, you've referenced the book and we've kind of teased it out there. So go ahead and tell the listeners about your project and about the book.
Yeah. So this would have been end of June in 2023, had this idea. I spent the better part of 20 years as a college basketball referee and traveling all over the country. And I developed this once I retired in 2020. I developed a rule for myself after many sleepless nights watching film that if I'm not able to fall asleep once I retired, within 5 minutes, I do one of two things. Both involve me physically leaving my bedroom, and that's either reading a physical book or writing in a notebook, not on my computer, not on an iPad or anything like that. So this idea came to me, which I initially thought was my idea, which came to be revealed that it wasn't my idea. Happy to dive into that too. But this question just popped in my head of like, what if you went a year without a cell phone? And I was like, that's the dumbest thing ever. I just started a business, 2 young kids. Like there was a bunch of other things. Like,
made no logical sense whatsoever.
Zero. So I went downstairs, gifting the curse of having a home office and spent about 4 or 5 hours whiteboarding this out and thinking about logistics and why would I do this and et cetera, et cetera. And between the time I had the idea to pulling the trigger was 6 weeks. It happened to be my anniversary of when I started my company. And so went from August 6th of 23 to August 6th of 2024 without a cell phone. So no cell phone, no flip phone, no landline, I didn't travel with my phone, just turned off. It just stayed at home. And the one rule was that if there was an emergency with someone, in my family at my house, I would turn it on. I obviously wasn't going to risk someone's health, but to me, like upset stomach, that's not an
That's
emergency.
not, yeah.
Sniffles, that's not an emergency.
Yeah.
Like forgot bread at the grocery, that's not an emergency. So there was a strict litmus test of a true 911 emergency. And then the last thing I'll say there is before I went into the year, the only rule I made for myself, because I knew I wanted to write a book, didn't know what it was going to be about, didn't know how, the year was going to turn out, but I just said I wasn't going to write a book about productivity. I didn't think the world needed one more book on how to hack your calendar or 5 steps to this.
Praise God.
Yeah. And that was the only rule. And so what really started as this cute little experiment, as a speaker, I'm like, oh, this would be a great thing that I can
It's a
go
fun
out
story
and
to tell on stage. Yeah.
quickly turned into a deep, profound and spiritual journey that if you would have told me all the things, good and bad, would have happened before I started, I don't know if I'm brave enough to say, yeah, I'll go through with all that, because there was a lot of wild turns that happened throughout the year.
Well, I want to connect to a couple things you've said about that. One, I can absolutely be witness to your diligence in this, because I met you during this time and we were both in Detroit, Michigan, so far away from where we live. And you did not have a cell phone. And in fact, when it was time to call your Uber to get to the airport or wherever the hotel you were getting to, it was interesting because I was like, what are you doing? And you were like, well, I got to go get to a computer and call an Uber. And I was like, wow. Like it just hit me like how much you take for granted that I would have just sat right there and pulled out my phone and ordered an Uber. Nobody would have even known that I was doing it, and it would have showed up, and it was a whole thing for
Yeah.
you to get a car to come pick you up
Well,
because you didn't have a
and
phone.
And even before that, right? So I had to go into the airport because that was the first time I traveled during the year. So I had to print out boarding pass, hotel reservation,
Old school.
maps. Like I had to go on Google Maps and print out, from the hotel to the event center where we had our
Yeah.
conference, and back and forth, and we were having, dinners. So I had to print all this stuff out, and it was kind of reminded me of 20 plus years ago when I first got my license, and there was no
Same.
GPS. There was just, you better pull out the printed off map.
Yeah,
So yeah, it
MapQuest.
was nostalgic for sure. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing you said is you thought it was your idea, and it wasn't. I do want to talk about that. But I love that you had a rule for yourself that when you couldn't sleep, you got up and either read a physical book or wrote in a physical journal, that there was no technology involved there. So there was already kind of a precursor to this idea. Was that a rule that you just made it for yourself?
Yeah, and that stems from, again, nearly 2 decades as a basketball official. We'd finish a game at 9:30, 10 o'clock, and if you think about where a lot of Division I schools are, they're not in big metropolitan cities. They're usually in Bloomington or West Lafayette or Evansville. So usually after a game, you're driving back to a big city that has an airport. So there was a lot of nights by the time, the endorphins wind down, you get back to the hotel, it's 12, 1 o'clock, and we were working back-to-back days. So you have a 4 a.m. alarm to get up and take the first flight out. So then you start doing the mental math. Do I want to go to sleep for a couple hours? Do I want to watch? And it's always, as a, performance junkie, always trying to get, 1% better. So I'd sit there, watch a couple plays. Next thing I know, after the game, it's now like 2 o'clock. And I'm like, oh, I got to go to sleep. So that's where it stemmed from. Just doing that day after day, year after year. I'm like, this is not going to serve me well once I'm off the court. Right. So it was, hey, what is something I can do? And it wasn't like every night before I go to bed, I set a timer. It's just kind of that, if I don't fall asleep and I find my wheels turning and counting sheep, it's like, all right, we need to get up and extinguish the mind, if you will. And so that's where it came from. Just got tired of sleepless nights and prioritizing sleep of, we need to find a better way to do this.
But what I love about that practice, and it's going to lead, I think, to wasn't really your idea, is when we kind of numb out with technology, instead of getting up and going to a physical book or a physically writing in a journal, we block those messages that the Holy Spirit may be trying to give to us. We don't allow the space to let those enter, but the physical, tactile nature of a journal or a book will allow that. So whose idea was the book if it wasn't yours?
Yeah. Great question. So this revelation, if you will, came to me about 3 or 4 weeks in. One of the habits I developed was, solo walk. Obviously, used to no phone year, would always take, client calls or just coaching calls, any sort of call and walk. So
Podcast,
yeah,
whatever.
whatever. And I realized I really enjoyed just being out and moving. And I said, well, there's no reason to stop that just because I'm not on the phone. So let's just continue with the solo walk every day, and would, instead of a phone, would just have a little notebook that I went through quite a few of those, jotting down ideas. And so it was about a month in, 3 or 4 weeks, and I just very distinctly remember hearing 3 things. Number 1, if you thought this was your idea, that's cute. That this wasn't your idea. Number 2, as much as this is a year without a phone, this is gonna have nothing to do with a phone. I was like, "That's kinda odd because this whole thing is going
Yeah.
a year without a phone." And then number 3, before the year started, right, I had this 6-week window of idea getting implanted and then, pulling the trigger. I came up with, Rebecca, I should go back and look now that the title of the book is out, but I probably had 75 just wild, random titles that I came up with.
Oh,
But I finally realized this is gonna be a lesson in futility because I'm gonna fall in love with one title, and then I'm gonna have confirmation or recency bias, and my whole filter of what I see during the year is gonna be like, well, hey,
trying
it's
to
gotta
make it fit to
align
your
with,
favorite
yeah.
title.
So I
Mhm.
was like, I gotta stop coming up with titles because I could
Which is
come up with
smart when people always say,
a couple
You're
hundred.
writing a book. What's the title?" I'm like, I don't know yet. It hasn't
Yeah.
presented itself to me.
Yeah, and so I heard a title, that was kind of the 3rd thing I heard, like, "Hey, all those cute titles, you don't need those." And the title that I selected, "The Call I Almost Missed," is a play on the title I heard in that conversation of answering the call without my
Mhm.
phone. It was a small tweak. And I talk about in the book, it wasn't the first time that God was talking to me, it was probably the first time that I heard it. And I think that's the significant difference. I think he's always talking. I know he's always talking,
Yeah.
but do we create the space and the rhythm in our life to hear it? And that was probably the first time, grew up Catholic, went to Catholic schools, Catholic high school, Catholic college, university, believed in God, but there was a distinct period in my life, probably from, 22, 18, maybe even till probably 40, if I'm being honest, of, 20 plus years where believed in God, went to church, here and there, but there wasn't a real relationship because I thought
Relationship.
I was achieving,
Yeah.
all of this success on my own. And that year was a big awakening. But hearing those 3 things in the
Mm.
first, not the first walk, but that first time that I had, it took about 30 days, if you will, to get
Yeah.
through the withdrawal and realize like, okay, we're in it now. We're past the, first few days of fun and telling everybody. And
The
it's like,
dopamine, the
yeah,
excitement about
now
all of it.
settling into a daily routine. And so that was really cool
So you
to,
say 30 days of kind of withdrawal-ish.
yeah, I mean, it was just kind of, I would say, I don't even know if it would be withdrawal. It was more just kind of like the fun, the newness
The
had
adjustment,
worn
yeah.
off, right? It was, you're
Which is
starting
the
to
case
settle in.
anything that you're doing, if you're
Yeah,
changing habits, you get the dopamine excitement of, "Oh, I'm gonna do this thing," and then once that goes away, you better have something to replace it with. 'Cause
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. In that 30 days, can you go back and describe the first 30 days to
Oh,
us?
yeah. I mean, one of the scary things was the first day, right? I don't even remember what it was. We got 2 young girls, and I'd look out from my office and they're out playing in the front yard. So finish what I was doing and go outside and, we're just playing. I couldn't even tell you what we're playing or if there's a made up game or tag or whatever. And at this time they would have been 2 and 4. And first thing I do, Rebecca, is reach for my phone in my pocket to take a picture,
Take a
take a
picture.
video or whatever. And
Yeah.
I'm like, isn't that crazy? Like, it's not like I just decided that day I was going to turn it off. I had known basically for 6 weeks. And
Mhm.
still on that first day, it's just human nature. And that was one of the takeaways. Like, just because you don't capture the moment doesn't mean it's not a memory, right? Like, you can still experience something and be present and live in
Mhm.
that experience. And yeah, as a parent, right? Like, you've got kids as well. It's like great to have all these pictures and memories, but sometimes, especially during that year, it's really special and really cool to just be there,
'Cause
fully
sometimes
present where
we
your feet are.
disconnect the moment trying to capture the moment.
Yeah. And then it's like, then it goes, you get out your phone to take a picture and it's like, well, let me just look at this text. Let me,
Mhm.
respond to that. And then next thing you know, it's like, wait, I thought I was playing with my kids. Now I'm,
Or the
10
kids
minutes later.
realize you're videoing or taking a picture, and now all of a sudden they're, maybe even just laughing or hamming it up for the camera. It still changes the moment. it changes how they're experiencing us and themselves. And I notice that I go to a lot of shows, I go to concerts, I go to different things, and you look around and nobody's really just singing and dancing. And in the moment, they're capturing the moment.
Two things about that. One, you talking about concerts. There's a great picture from a couple of years ago when LeBron James, I don't know if you've seen this picture, when LeBron James broke the all-time scoring record.
Mm.
And the picture's from the opposite end of the baseline. And so it's, looking down. And it's an iconic picture. And I'm not a huge LeBron fan. That's another podcast episode.
Disclaimer.
For another day. Yeah. But in the picture, in the front row on the baseline are LeBron's kids and Phil Knight. And literally in this picture, Rebecca, every single human has their phone out because, they're part of history, but they want to capture it. And Phil Knight, like in this picture, is the only person that is just sitting there experiencing the moment and doesn't have his phone out. And I mean, that picture is just worth 1,000 words, but that just shows like what it means to be present. And you had said, we were just talking about kids and you were talking about kind of like the precursors to what started this. I wish I could remember the exact date, but it couldn't have been more than like a couple weeks before the idea came to me. And it was a Saturday. And as I look back now, this was the question that really started the process in planting the seeds. And sitting on the couch and, you were mentioning like your kids notice. And my daughter came up to me and she was like, "Daddy, why are you always on your phone?" And this wasn't a Tuesday at like 2:00. It was a Saturday at like 10 in the morning. And it was one of those like moments where it could have just been like another question. There was something about that question. And I got a chapter about it in the book because that was really the question that changed everything. Is like, what was I doing? And the cool thing, I don't even remember what I was looking at. So that's how I know it wasn't important, right? It's not like it was to see if a proposal went through. It wasn't to, respond to my agent about a speaking. Like, who knows what it was? I don't even remember, right? But that was a question. And the fact that it was on a Saturday in the morning and not during the week. It's not like she walked in my office after leaving school between, working hours. So they always notice. And that was really the question that started and changed everything and really laid the seeds and planted the foundation to start that journey.
I've seen the pictures of toddlers, babies, trying to interact with their parents. And the minute the parent will pick up the phone, you see the look on the little kid's face. They're not even old enough to know what's happening, but they know there has been a break in the connection between parent and child. And I've done it. I'm not saying this because I've not done it. I cry every time I see one of those because I know I've done it. I know that we didn't realize we were hurting our kids by doing it. But just seeing it physically on the look on that child's face is just heartbreaking. And so this idea of presence and being able, one, to hear the voice of God because we are being present, and then to have that ability to connect with life and our kids and what's going on around us, I think we're shifting. And I just am so happy that God is speaking to you and others about this. I called this idea a few months ago and some of my friends thought I was crazy. I said, you watch, in a very short period of time, we're going to have kitchen phones hanging from the wall again. And they said, oh, come on. And I said, I think people are tired of it. I think there's a shift happening. And then sure enough, just a few months ago, I saw a company that's marketing home phones.
Bringing it back old school.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you would think after writing the book, I would know every specific story. But one of the things that came about, and I think that listeners can take, right? Because the book is not a prescription by any means. If anything, it's probably going to leave people with more questions than answers. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But one of the things I remember, if I remember the exact story, was I think it was like raining outside, maybe after work or something. And I just remember like we went outside and just kind of like ran in the rain and it kind of being silly for 5 minutes. And as I started thinking it more, right, like anytime, as a coach, like if we've never done something, like we got to start so small that it's almost laughable so that it can actually become a habit. You don't, if you've never ran, you don't want to set a goal for tomorrow to go run a marathon because that's not going to happen. But I just remember having this thought, and I talk about it in the book, of like just choosing 5 minutes of presence at a time. Like I don't need to be present for the next 5 hours with my kids, but what can I do, for 5 minutes
Mhm.
to be present, right? Because as our attention spans are shrinking, and that's what I just kept coming back through during that year. And even now, even with a cell phone back in my
Yeah.
pocket, just choosing presence 5 minutes at a time,
Mhm.
right? So I'm gonna be so
Kind of
present.
wedging it back into
Yeah.
our
And,
lives.
and that time comes up and it's like, all right, reset. And like, now
Mhm.
I'm going to do 5 more. And the next thing you know, it's been an hour or two and you've lost track of time. Don't set out for, I'm going to be present all day Saturday. That's not realistic, but can you just choose 5 minute chunks where it's like, you're going to get all of me 100%, whatever you want to do, we're going to do that for 5 minutes
Yeah.
at a time. And that time comes up. And that really helped me during the year of like, let's just go choose 5 minutes at a time.
Yeah. Well, it's like my daily stillness practice of the 10 minutes, start with 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And now I spend well over an hour each morning in my daily stillness practice, and you can't get me to give it up. But I didn't start at an hour.
No,
I
that's right.
started at 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So somebody picks up your book, which praise God is going to be out sometime fairly soon. Well, when do you think it is going to be out? Do you know yet?
I've actually got a call later this week. I'm targeting for early January. So
Okay.
that's as long as I finish all these editing rounds up here in the next
So
week or so.
it's
Yeah.
close. It's getting
Yeah,
close.
we are close. We are close.
As somebody picks up this book, what are the things that you think will surprise them
In general or about me or just
as they go to read the book? What are some of the things that you think will be surprising to them from what they read?
I think probably the first one, whether you've known me or not, and this isn't to pat myself on the back, but how vulnerable I am. And there were levels to the book. You and I have talked about this, but my mom got sick the last week of the year without a phone. So ended it August 6th, and a week later was in the hospital for 106 days and ended up passing away. And it's amazing how God can reveal things and you might not realize it at the time. Like, I wonder why I heard that, or I wonder what that's going to be for. And usually it's not for right then, it's usually for, sometime down the road. But the biggest takeaway from the book, Rebecca, was things that don't matter, don't matter. And unfortunately, we never take the time to identify what matters. So we spend our time chasing what doesn't, and then we become anxious and worried. And next thing you know, 20 years have gone by. But I think the first thing, it was actually the editor, when I got my feedback after submitting the manuscript, he was like, this is one of the deepest books I've read in a while. And it certainly wasn't what I set out to do. So I think that's probably the surprising thing is like, wow, this guy really went all in and like he didn't really hold anything back. I would say that was probably the number one surprising thing. There's so many different takeaways. I think the second thing is if nobody took anything else away from the book of just realizing, and I call this out, like I don't have any intention that someone will go a day, a week, a month, a year without their cell phone. I just ask whether I'm coaching an individual client or consulting with the leadership team is like starting with like, have you taken the time to define what success is? Whether it's in a project, whether it's in your life, more specifically your life. But what I find in working with successful, and I use air quotes, executives is that a lot of times they're very successful, but they've never taken the time to define success. So they're chasing someone else's definition or version of success. And so just taking the time and then, realizing, again, if nothing else, I am the poster child for starting something at the worst time. I was just writing about this. It probably will come out later this week in my newsletter. Like, what if as a sign to take action, what if you only took action when you didn't feel ready? Like, how would that change the dynamic of what you do, whether it's personally or professionally? That was the sign of like, well, I don't feel ready. Okay, great. Now today we're going to take action because as you know, it's usually like a 9-to-1 ratio of not feeling ready to ready. But what if you just took an action when you didn't feel ready? And because we're going to feel not ready more times than not, you would just find that you have action.
There's more opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Jim Valvano said in his famous ESPY speech, and that'd be really cool if people experience this, but he said, what's like a full day, I'm paraphrasing, is like if you laugh, if you cry, and maybe a third thing. But I think there's going to be times when people read the book and they laugh. There's going to be times when the questions I ask maybe be hit too close to home and they've got to put it down. There's going to be times when I share some things in the book that genuinely outside of the publishers haven't told anyone in, close family or friends. Just being comfortable enough for myself to put it all out there and just know like people are going to respond how they respond. And then kind of the last thing I'll share there is I came across this question during the year and I think about it every time I walk through a door frame now. I think about it before any podcast I go on. I write it down multiple times throughout the day. I mean, I wrote it down on this paper next to me before our episode here today and the question is, what will I regret? And so it's more of a big picture question, but it's also to reframe every conversation and experience and action throughout the day. So when our conversation is over, how I get in the right frame of mind now is like, what will I regret after our conversation? Like if something came up after a question that Rebecca asked me, and well, I don't know if I should say that because I'm not sure how she's going to feel or what are the listeners going to think?
Yeah.
Am I really worried about someone I'm probably never going to meet, what they think about me, right? Which is kind of like funny when you break it down. But like when I was writing the book and there was layers to the book of like the version that's going to come out in print is not even close to the first version, not even close to the manuscript, right? So using that question to guide my actions and decisions on a daily, and do I fall short? Absolutely. Do I make mistakes? No question. But it's a great question that reframes and continuously brings me back to the present moment of like, what am I going to regret when this is over?
Which brings us back to how I introduced this episode of presence. You and I share the belief that presence is the new economy. It's the differentiator. It's for leadership, for parenting, for all the things in our lives that we care about. It's everything. And I think this for such a time as this, as the Bible says, your book coming out next year, people are feeling it, feeling the need for it, and still caught up in their habits and patterns that are keeping them stuck. But I keep feeling this connection point between you can't get depth without presence. One of the podcasts that I listen to, Taylor Welch has a podcast called The Deep End. And his opening line is, everybody wants to go high, but in order to go high, you got to go deep. And I keep feeling like the presence, you didn't know this was going to happen, really, I don't think. But by having presence allowed you to go deep with these concepts because you had that time and space and the Lord could speak to you and you could interact with your family differently. And it created a lot of depth, it sounds like.
It did. When I started, I'd be lying if I said this was going to be this unbelievable, transformational, like I didn't have that on the bingo card of expectations or, outcomes.
That's also how you knew it was God.
Yeah, right. And so I went into that year without a phone, as a speaker, for the most part, we all kind of talk about some of the same
Similar
things and
stuff,
put our
yeah.
twists based on experience or whatever. But, in doing research, I was like, wow, this is going to be the first book in the market about going and understanding cell phones have only been around 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
And I've seen a handful of people who have done something similar, but never wrote a book about it. So as a speaker, when I started this, I was like, that's a pretty interesting.
Check that box, yeah.
Yeah, of, kind of having one of those things I can talk about. A lot of people can talk about presence, but not anyone else can talk about going a year without a cell phone and really, feeling that presence.
Yeah.
But what started as just this cute little experiment, hey, let's go a year without a cell phone, completely transformed into this deep, spiritual, profound journey that, again, I had no expectations or understanding that it might happen. But that goes back to the intentionality, because when I started the year, as I said at the beginning of our conversation, the only thing I committed to was not writing a book on productivity, no 5-step, how to hack your calendar or whatever. And so my only, rule that I set for myself was whether it was a podcast interview, whether it was a TV appearance, a speaking gig, in person or virtual, going to a conference, like whatever it was, I was just going to be present. And it's funny how like that was the only rule I set for myself and not even trying or forcing it. Cause I think, for entrepreneurs and just people in general, sometimes we get caught up in the how and we let that stop us as opposed to just having a vision. And I have no idea how we're going to get there, but I just know I'm going to take a step every single day. And so that's a great confirmation to me when I get in my own head of like, look, you didn't know how that year without a cell phone was going to turn out. When I look back at my 20-year fish eating career, I didn't, the day I started, I had no idea I was going to work with the Olympic team and make it to Division I and try out for the NBA. Like I had no idea. And I really wasn't worried about any of that. This year was a great reminder of just be intentional, be present. And if you're those two things, I think you'll be pretty happy with what comes from that experience.
And I just keep thinking about each of us has a preordained, predestined life, is what I believe, that, biblically, that God has a plan for us. And our job is to discover his plan for us. And that is exactly what you have just described to me. Is I put the distractions down, and wow, in that place of presence, he showed me things that I had no idea I was going to experience or learn or understand. And when I talk to the business community, especially, which is largely our listeners here, for decades, all of us have been, kind of chasing something. And like you said, not really knowing what success, defining what success is. People can tell you what they don't want, but they can't always tell you what they do want. And there's this prove yourself, work harder mindset. And that can lead into what I call a counterfeit life. You're leading a life, and it may be really successful by business terms, but is it your life? Is it the one that makes your soul happy? Because when I surveyed people and said, what does thriving mean to you for my first book? They would say, oh my gosh, they filled in the blanks. I should probably think about this. I should probably know this, shouldn't I? And then they kind of got themselves to the place they would describe feelings. Nobody put granite countertops in a VP title,
Right. Yeah.
And so there's this disconnect between what we think we're supposed to be doing and achieving, and then what we really want to feel. And what I'm hearing from you is this year took you on this journey of depth to allow you to experience things at a deeper level that day-to-day worldly success was never going to give you.
And too often, Rebecca, to your point, we tell ourselves we're too busy, right? And it's not to discredit responsibilities. And yeah, we do have metrics that, at work or wherever you are in the business or professional sphere. But it's like, at what point do you owe it to yourself to not sit back and just ask yourself, some pretty simple questions? Is, am I thriving? Or do I even know the definition?
Yeah. What does
of
that mean
thriving?
for me?
What is success for me? Or am I just chasing something my parents, my neighbors, my siblings are doing, right?
Yeah.
And, we don't have time for that. And I always say, like, time is never an issue. It's just your priorities.
Yeah.
Like, you can find time if it's really, truly important. Otherwise, you look back and you're like, man, I'm 67 and retiring. Like, what do I have to show for?
Right.
Right? Because for as many funerals as I've been to, and gave the eulogy for my mom, very rarely, if ever, do they talk about titles or accomplishments. It's usually about how they made other people feel, or, what sort of purpose and mission did they have, and how they helped others, right? Not like, oh, he had a great corner office and 2 houses. And if that's what, it's not to say don't chase success and don't have nice things, like, do that. But it's like, for what? What's the reason and the purpose behind it? Did you help people out along the way? Did you serve a bigger purpose? Was it bigger than yourself?
Yeah.
Were you just going about aimlessly and it's like, well, I'll just kind of do this and see how it goes?
Yeah. And you and I both know people that have worldly success, which is, the Bible says we're supposed to have great things. It's promised.
It just shouldn't be the focus.
And I know some people that have, 2 or 3 homes, and they never use them. They just have them. And then I know other people that are like, let's all get together and go to the, vacation home, and let's have this beautiful human to human experience. And that's using things in a way that they're having experiences and feelings and camaraderie and all those things. That's beautiful. But just to have it for having its sake doesn't make you feel warm and snuggly at night.
No, that's not going to help anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So you're going to come back when the book launches.
Would love to.
And we're going to talk about what kind of feedback that you're getting and how people are experiencing the book. And I can't wait to get my hands on it. So we'll let all the listeners know when it's coming out. Let me ask you one last question before we part ways, because I don't want to give too much more away, because I want people to go buy the book. What are you thinking about as the writer once people get this book in their hands? How are you feeling? Because this is a new experience for you. We talked a little bit about this before we hit record.
Yeah.
First time writer, this depth of you is getting ready to be in the hands of, I'll just say, millions of people. We're going to put it out there as
Let's do that.
That's where we're going. How are you feeling about that?
I don't know if we talked about this before, but there was a point when before hitting submit, right? I was thinking about, let's just use a round number. Let's say I happen to pass away today, and next week there's 300 people at my funeral. Okay. And those people are people that have known me for 40 years, family, friends, other acquaintances, whatever, right? So that let's say 300 at the funeral. And then as I was finishing writing the book, because this is what would trip me up as like, well, I don't know if I should say this or put that in or share this part of me, because what are Bobby, Susie, and Sherry going to think about me? And then I started thinking, okay, 300 versus 3 million, right? And 2 million, a million, whoever. And this book, as you know, as an author, like the book is going to live long after we're gone. And that was really when I would get tripped up. Am I worried about the 300 and that number on the other side is not finite. Like that number could grow
We
for years.
We don't
and years.
know. Yeah.
And
The
so
ripple effect.
that really helped me get out of my own head. But like you said, we're like 95% of the way there with edits. And it's just weird emotions of kind of when I hit submit, it's like, yes, I got this. It's an accomplishment as you know, writing a book is really hard. That's why a lot of people don't do it, especially sharing at the depths that I did. And so it's this duality of like, yes, that's over. But now it's like, oh crap. Like
it's actually just beginning.
Yeah. And so it's just like, I'm feeling all the emotions of it, getting ready to come out, and like, it's going to be weird to walk in a bookstore and like actually like see your book sitting there. And like I was talking to my coach when I was like finishing up, and I was like, wow, this is like scary. And just being reminded that more people have a PhD than have written a book. Because you walk in Barnes and Noble and you just think like, oh, every single person has written a book. And it's like, no, not that many people have written a book. And there's, people that have written books have written multiple. So that skews the numbers too. But it's like, it's actually more rare to write a book than it is to get a PhD. So it's all the emotions. And I'm still in the thick of it. So I'm excited to report back once it comes out. But anytime you put something out there in the world, whether it's a social media post or an article or a book, like there's going to be things coming from all sides. But I often joke that God gave me the best training camp because I was an official for 20 years. So I don't know if there's anything that someone is going to say that it's going to like affect me or hurt like, what are they going to say that I haven't heard on a basketball court, right? Like, I don't know what someone's going to come up with that's going to, like ruin my day or something, because, if you're taking the time to post a comment or negative review, like you don't have better things to do with your life. Like that's
You're
on you.
so
That's
right. That is the best training ever to be in the public eye. That's amazing. Well, I'll give you advice you didn't ask for that my coach insisted that I do before my book came out, which was practice receiving compliments. Because I believe, just from reading your newsletter, you're an amazing writer, and I love the depth that you share in your posts. I believe that you wholeheartedly will receive far more compliments than you are, hey, sit down, you're rotten, whatever. I don't think that's going to be the issue here. I think it's more about, for me, that was difficult. We're all different. I just wasn't raised in an environment where, we were showered with compliments. I grew up in a small farm community and family, and it was, you loved each other by telling people to get your ass to work.
Yeah.
And so receiving compliments, she said, I want you to journal every compliment you get over the next few days. Even if somebody says, hey, I like that dress or anything, and learn to receive it. And I got to the point where now when somebody compliments me, I say, thank you, I received that. So I would say, Tommy Short, you need to prepare for the other side of this coin, which is going to be people sharing how meaningful this has been for them.
I appreciate that. And now that you say that, I realize something I was doing is maybe preparing me for that. But, with the newsletter, I always think, one, and I appreciate you for sharing that, because anytime someone either tells me or takes the time to read the newsletter, but then B, to take the time to either send a text, call, or send an email. And I actually, not all of them, but I would say probably 95% of anytime someone sends an email after reading the newsletter and they take the time to send me an email and share, not just, hey, that was great, but either, something that they had been thinking about or something in their life. And I actually have a folder in my desk drawer called Feel Good. So even on the
Same.
days when I don't feel like things are clicking or I'm judging what I'm writing, I always have this bank, if you will, of all these deposits and I just think it's really special when you take the time to share something that's so personal, and then someone takes the time to throw out
Yeah.
and share their congratulations or just appreciation. That means the world to me. And I always tell people, like, you have no idea what it means, because, like, as you know, when you take the time to write, it's
Yeah, you're
exhausting.
sitting here by
It's,
yourself
oh,
pouring things out, and you're like,
is
"Hope
anyone going to
this
read this?
matters."
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
putting all this stuff out there. Does anyone care? So
Yeah.
yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm sure that's going to take some getting used to, for sure.
Receive them all. To me, the human to human spirit is about the giving and the receiving. And I wish we all took more time to share with people how their work matters and means
Yeah,
something to them, because I don't care who you are. Everybody needs to know that they matter. And
that's
so
right.
it's good stuff. Thank you for being my neighbor and my friend and being on the
Yep.
show. And I'm excited to see what's coming next for you.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate the time and excited to share the book with the world here in a couple short months.
Make it a great day.
I'm not coming down. I never left it on the ground. I'm not coming down.
Thanks for being here. You can follow us on Instagram, Business is Human, or TikTok, Rebecca Fleetwood Hession. It's a great way to share some of the clips with your colleagues and friends. All right, make it a great day. Love you, mean it.